So, with that all being said, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and start and ask my panelists to introduce themselves before I ask the official questions. So, we'll start with Anne, then Kirk, then John, then Brian, if you don't mind just saying who you are, where you're representing from, and what you do there.
Hi, my name is Anne Mangano. I am the Collection Services Coordinator at the Iowa City Public Library, which means I'm in charge of the purchasing and organizing of materials at the library.
Find the right buttons. My name is Kirk Cheyney. I'm the Director of Operations for the Iowa City Fab Lab. We are here to give tools and technology to everybody in Iowa City who wants to build stuff, make stuff, invent stuff.
Was it me next? I'm sorry. I already forgot the order. Um, uh, I'm John Engelbrecht, Executive Director of Public Space One, a community arts organization and contemporary art center in Iowa City. Glad to be here.
I'm Brian Johannesen. I'm the programming director at the Englert Theater downtown Iowa City. So I'm responsible for all the stuff that ends up on our stage.
All right, thanks, y'all. Okay, so the first question is, what did you study in college, and how has it influenced your professional journey? If this time we could start with Kirk, then go to Brian, then Anne, then John.
All right. Well, you started with the weird one first. I right out of high school, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. I wanted to build prosthetics. But I didn't have the math or science grades. So I was good at art. So I went into theater and sculpture, and then got my associates, or nearly. And then about a decade later, I went back when I was 28 years old and got my biomedical engineering degree at age 32 for prosthetics, which is what I've always wanted to do. And then through a series of life things, I ended up starting the first Fab Lab in Iowa, and that's been 13 years almost now. So, yeah, lots of art, lots of science.
Yeah, I was an English major, creative writing major, focus, and I thought I wanted to be a writer, but it turned out I am a songwriter, so I still do that like in my life, and like I would call myself semi-pro. I occasionally get paid to do it. But yeah, and then I ended up going to grad school and getting an MBA in music business because I wanted to work in the music business and I wasn't really sure how to do that. And I'd say the English degree ended up being, um, while it did kind of just seem like it didn't set me up for a career directly in the way some other majors do, I would say that it taught me to communicate well. And that has been a huge asset, especially in a world that's dominated by emails. The ability to kind of clearly and concisely ask for what you need has helped quite a bit.
I was a history major and I had a minor in poli sci. And I would agree with Brian that my history degree, the things that I learned in a day-to-day classroom, may have not seemed like a career path, but it did set me up with certain skills. And so I learned how to research, how to make an argument and write concisely, and also how to identify trends and find themes. And uh, I originally wanted to be a history teacher, but I had originally worked as in a library when I was younger, when I was in high school, and I took those research method classes, and I really enjoyed the research part of it. And working between that, working in the library, and my love of reading and sharing my love of reading, becoming a librarian clicked, and so I went on to get my master's of library and information science.
Yeah, I was kind of all over the place as an undergrad, but I always had an interest in art and specifically photography and video, even from when I was in junior high and high school. But never thought of it as a career path until I was well into my undergraduate education and taking some mass communications classes and had to take an art class, and someone said, you should really consider this as what you want. And I don't know what made them say that or not, but ended up coming to Iowa for my grad degree. And I was at that time really much focused on a very interior darkroom craft. You know, I was like a traditional darkroom photographer and not very extroverted at all. And then working with one of the professors in the department kind of opened me up to collaboration and doing things that I thought were foo-foo when I was an undergrad, like performance art and that sort of thing. And that led me to having a show at Public Space One, and I really thought that that was a great platform for engaging the community, and that's how I ended up being involved for the last 15 years in that arts organization.
Thank you all for sharing. So next question is, what are some of the most significant trends currently shaping your industry? And can you share an example of how you or your organization specifically is adapting to meet those challenges? This time we'll start with Anne, and then we'll move from Brian to there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things impacting libraries, from artificial intelligence to digital collection delivery. Then there's some politics surrounding libraries right now, but I do want to talk about social services. So one of the things that I think is important about libraries is they're continually to change. They're continuing changing. We're always being kind of asked to flex our adaptability and flexibility as an organization. And and in the end, libraries serve their community, so you need to be where your people are. And we used to be very strictly an information provider to our community, and that's not really quite the role that we are anymore. You can find information pretty much anywhere, you know that. Um, but we are becoming more of a social service, and that means that we're connecting the community with the services that they need, whether that be through nonprofit agencies, whether that finding that sometimes their needs are identified, sometimes they're unidentified, and trying to work with the person to get the needs, the information, or the sources that they need, whether that's housing or food. Um, and you have to really work towards building partnerships in those communities to make sure that you have the right training, that you're working with people about where they are, how do you best serve vulnerable populations, and connecting them with the partnering agencies. So that's kind of how libraries are adapting in that one specific avenue.
Yeah, I think in the music business, the big thing is just costs. Costs are rising incredibly, especially for touring artists. Um, you're seeing, bands that used to get guarantees of $10,000 asking for 25, and it's not them being greedy. It's that the tour bus costs twice as much, and gas is expensive, hotels are really expensive, and all of that. So trying to manage the costs and keep ticket prices from getting out of control. Because once ticket prices hit a certain level, we see attendance drop drastically. So trying to balance that. And there's a couple of things that we've done as the Englert to try to kind of combat that. We started to do more comedians just because it's one person. They usually fly in. It's like the expenses are just lower, and the pricing can be a bit more reasonable for all that ancillary stuff. And then also, like on the festival side, we've created a new festival that's going to launch in September. That's all about songwriting and songwriters. And it's an important festival, we think, for this town because it's such a writing town, but also the the back of the napkin math gets a lot easier when you're trying to get solo artists to come play solo sets with just their guitar as opposed to a whole band. And paying for one hotel room is a lot less expensive than paying for six. So that's one of the ways we've adapted to the rising costs. Of course, we love to have bands, and we want to have as many bands as we can come through. So we're hoping that costs can come down soon. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you both. We'll go to Kirk and then John.
The biggest thing that's changed in our industry lately is the right to fix, the right to open, whatever you call that, that new law that's going into effect. So for the past, 10, 20 years, companies have more and more tried to keep people out of their cases. Like if you open your computer, your warranty is voided. If you change this thing out, then you can't get a new one. All of those things. And they've been very litigious and protective of their stuff. But now there's a new law, at least for now, that they can that you can open up your stuff and fix it yourself. The most I've heard about it lately is actually John Deere, who's pretty aggressively fought this and apparently charges a lot for fixing something that a farmer is finding they can fix for about $60 in an hour of time. So so it's pulling the curtain back on a lot of things, and that's bringing in an increased number of people who want to learn the skills to fix the things, whether it be their computer or electronics, for the most part. But on top of that, as the economy goes down, we find that our people, we get more members. We've noticed it several times. People don't rush out to buy a new table; they try and fix the one they have. That kind of thing. So it's a sad thing that we're kind of a barometer. We're the canary in the coal mine. Like, how many members does he have? Oh, well then, I guess the economy's going down. I hope that's not actually the case, but that's the biggest trend we've seen is people are trying to fix their own things a lot more. And we've been actively told not to for the last 20 to 30 years. So it's a nice change to see.
Yeah, this is an interesting question at this time because I feel like the last month has like been a little bit of budding of like potential new trends that are happening, and right now there's just a lot of precarity, and I know we live in a world of precarity naturally over the last however long you want to frame it, but. So I guess I would say, resilience is a big part of what we try and kind of guide ourselves in, whether that's diversifying our various revenue streams, leveraging what kind of funding we can get uh, to spread it out or to bolster what we're already doing. Trying not to put too many eggs in, say, the federal government's grants or something like that. Even though, the NEA is still there, and I hope that people are applying for those grants and they keep reimbursing people who spend the money on them. Um, so that's one thing I think I like to think that, and this may just be me putting it out there, so it's out there in the universe more that uh, that philanthropy is going more towards supporting people for the work they're doing and not just programming. So that there's some operational support, and I feel like that trend sort of started during COVID, and I don't know if it's increasing or not at this moment, but I hope it does because there's a lot of time and money that gets sunk into just getting grants to do one program when there's a lot of arts orgs that need the support to just do what they do on a daily basis. And I'm sorry if I got a notice that my internet was unstable, so I'll stop there.
Your internet was telling you it's time to stop. All right. Thank you everyone for your thoughts on that one. So the next question is, what are some key skills, qualities, or experiences you believed helped you progress in your career? This time, if we could actually start with Brian.
Yeah. So I tried to do as many different jobs as I could in the industry. I went to grad school in Nashville, and in Nashville, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different things for basically no money. So I was like, well, I'll just do all of them. So I worked for a management company. I worked for a record label. I was an agent for a while. Obviously, I've been a musician. I've played in clubs and I've booked shows on my own. I've booked shows for venues. So I just tried to do as much as I could And I think the skill that really taught me was empathy and like understanding how every kind of person I interact with in my job is doing their job. And so I can better, approach the conversation knowing what they're looking for, and we can get to an agreement faster. And also just like understanding, we talk about it all the time because sometimes you'll have a band come in with a tour manager who's just in a bad mood and, just kind of difficult to deal with. And it helps to understand like, oh, I know what it's like to have been, on the road for 30 days straight and having every single night be different with a different challenge, and it just wears on you. So it's super helpful to have that perspective of if you're interested in an industry that requires a lot of either negotiation or talking with other people in different facets of the industry to do those other jobs, so you can just kind of better wrap your mind around how the whole thing functions.
Yeah, absolutely. Really great advice. We'll go to John, then Kirk.
Yeah, that's a good one, Brian. For me, the soft skills, the personal skills, uh, including empathy, communication, just being present with other people, goes so far in and not carrying a certain ego with what you're doing. And I think we often talk about like as people running an arts venue and working with a lot of different people, how did we not take like social work classes and those sorts of classes where we're dealing with the public all the time? And so a lot of those humanities skills, and the last thing I would add to that is like I really am thankful for having gone through art school because it taught me to critique, it taught me to take criticism, and it taught me to use that to get better and not be offended when someone says they don't understand one thing I'm doing. But I think if everyone went through art school, our world would be a much better place because we'd learn to uh, be better at disagreeing with each other without tearing each other apart.
I will totally agree with the art school thing. My first degree, like I said, was in theater and sculpture, and um, even though there were 10 years between my first time in college and my engineering, for the first couple of years of engineering, it was very books, math, science, that kind of stuff. But after sophomore year, we started designing, and I suddenly shot way to the head of the class because I could visualize in 3D with all of my sculpture experience, and uh, and then my theater experience has really helped because I'm not afraid to stand in front of a large group of people and talk. Um, to John's point, I do have an ego, so that helps a lot, and so. Um, my art experience has really helped with engineering, and I very much suggest that all engineers take some sort of sculpture class, drawing class, something that makes them do more than just brain work. There's a special kind of inspiration that you get when you're just working with your hands, and unfortunately we teach engineers right now to work with their brains, and there's a disconnect there. The last thing I'll say is because I had 10 years between, I always had these crazy ideas, but nobody listened to me. And I was a cashier at Walmart, and I was the guy who sold you gas, and I was the guy who drove the armored car. Um, I did so many things, installed carpets, Joe jobs that anyone can have. And throughout that, I met so many smart people and so many people that never went to college, never got a degree. And also then through the school, I met so many people with doctorates who couldn't, read how to pour water out of a boot when the instructions are on the heel. Like brains don't equal degrees. And unfortunately, people kind of equate those two things. So my regular people experience and not being stuck in school and then just going right on to my professional career I think really helped me to treat everybody with respect and not add degree equals worth it. So that's helped me a lot.
Great. Anne, we'll finish with you.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would add to, I love the discussion about empathy. I was going to talk about that and understanding. I'm in management, and I think understanding that people are motivated by different things and have come to a table with totally different expectations or different histories or experiences is really important. But one thing, as I was listening to everybody talk, is I started out in my career in 2008, and we had a huge recession, and libraries were impacted down the line. As property tax values shifted and changed, and our incomes went down. And one of the things that I think built as a skill in that was adaptability and resilience. And so when we moved into this period of time, that really helped during COVID when we had to figure out how do we give someone a book with the buildings closed. And then now with the way that property tax reform is, how will we change our budgets to meet the needs of the community? If our community is changing, how do we adapt the library? And so those are, I'll just add the adaptability and that kind of and also just not being reactionary, but thinking down the line too of like, okay, if this domino falls, then this domino is vulnerable, and just making sure that you're creating your own bulwarks too.
Thank you all for those very helpful thoughts. So the next question is, what networking strategies would you suggest for students aiming to build meaningful connections in your area or in your field? If we could start with Kirk this time.
Biggest networking thing, and this kind of goes back to what I was just saying, is to stop talking with everyone in your silo. It's amazing how many times you just meet the people that are in your field, and so all of the ideas that you hear and you think of are the ideas that you've already heard and thought of. So if you are in engineering and you're trying to do something with structural design, go and hang out with someone who does things with water purification or energy, or that kind of thing. Like, switch it up. The best ideas come from people who are thinking outside the box, and the fastest way of thinking outside the box is talking with people that don't live in your box. So whatever it is you're doing, try and do the opposite. Try and figure out what the people who make silly putty are doing. If you're the one who's creating, solid steel, your perspective shifts, and it's really great how I can think of quilting and be like, oh yeah, that's like the laser cutter. Like, you wouldn't think those two things go together, but it's amazing how many connections you'll make when you start, broadening your horizons.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good advice. We'll go to Anne and then Brian.
Yeah, Abby had sent these questions earlier, and so I was thinking through them, and the first thing that came to mind was professional organizations, and then I, like Kurt, was thinking it's just a silo, and you kind of get this feedback loop within some professional organizations. So I kind of shifted to talking to community organizations, and I think one thing about public libraries is that every public library should be different. Every public library serves a different community. So we serve Iowa City. Our library is not going to look the same as North Liberty. It's not going to look the same as Des Moines or Chicago. It's going to be very different. And how you decide what your library should look like is really working with the community. And that means making connections with local nonprofit groups, with people in different industries within your community, working with different government departments or the school district, elected officials, and then talking to your community on a regular basis. And so that should get a good sense of what the pulse of the community is. and then what your services should look like the reflection of that pulse, and so they should be continually changing.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I would say like in my industry, the jobs aren't often like posted on Indeed or something. It's kind of like you just kind of have to know somebody, um, which is really frustrating when you're trying to get started. And something that worked for me was I just would look up people in my area who had jobs that I liked, that I thought looked cool. For example, when I was in Nashville, I bought a vinyl record and I was like, I wonder who put this out. And it was like this Light in the Attic Records. And it was like, what is Light in the Attic Records? And it's like, oh, they're based in Nashville and it's a small shop and it's this one guy who is like the leader of it. And I just sent him an email and I was like, hey, can I just buy you a cup of coffee? And he was very skeptical and like made it very clear I wasn't asking for a job. I just wanted to know like his story and how he ended up doing that. And I did that a lot with a lot of people that I liked, and I did it with my professors who I connected with, where it was like, "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" And it's really just kind of like being curious and being inquisitive about people. People love to talk about themselves. They love to tell their story. Um, and most of the time it's pretty interesting. And the way that they got to where they are was unconventional in many ways. And so you learn a lot that way. And eventually I got my first job in the industry because I had started going to get coffee with one of my professors. And then he eventually said, hey, my friend runs this company. You should talk to him. And I got a job with him. So it works. It feels silly. It's intimidating and scary to do that kind of thing, but it works. And, the worst case scenario is somebody got a free cup of coffee and spent 30 minutes talking about themselves. And, best case scenario is you might find yourself a mentor or something.
Absolutely. The power of asking people about themselves. I really appreciate that. John, we'll wrap up with you on this one.
Yeah, that's I like that, and to kind of build off what Brian was saying, I think Iowa City is a great place for that because you can the size of this town, there's a lot of people who have done a lot of things all over the world, and yet they're usually one email away from wanting to have coffee with you. So it's a good experimental place to try ideas out and connect with people. So I totally agree with that, and it also has an element of one of my answers for an upcoming question, which I guess I'll save for then. But the other thing I was thinking about this, especially in the arts, is just go to things, go to art shows, go to music shows, go to um, something that may be a little bit outside of your comfort zone, to get to Kirk's point about different silos that we find ourselves in. There's a lot to be said for putting down your phone and going and meeting some people and not just like participating via Instagram on things. And so I would encourage that. Just like really, if you want to be in the arts, become part of your arts community by showing up to arts events.
Plug, especially for local arts, because there's a ton here. So absolutely. So the next question is, how can students and new graduates stand out in a competitive job market, especially as entry-level employees? So this time we're actually going to go back and start with you, John.
I get that's a tough one. How do you stand out in a competitive job market? Um, I'm really bad at that. I shouldn't even answer this question. Um, I kind of created my position by just hanging around too long. And so, standing out, I think you're I hate to say it, but I think you're at a disadvantage if you're more introverted. That if you can find some way to get over that and meet people and be vocal, I mean, it's like the cliche, the squeaky wheel does get the oil in that way. So, I my son, who I love to give unsolicited advice to, applied for a job, and he really wanted this job working with a professor to help produce the podcast. And after he did the interview, I said, "Well, did you follow up?" And he's like, "What?" I was like, write them back and tell them you really want this job, like and that was like news to him. And I thought that was just like a given that, to really show interest in a thing, you have to, sometimes say that you want something ad nauseum until people recognize that. So, um, as someone who is a little more introverted, try not to be so much of that and be vocal about what you want and follow up.
Right, then we'll go to Brian, then Kirk, then Anne.
Yeah, I think John nailed it and also nailed going to things. If you're interested in the music business, the only thing you can do is really go to shows and get to know the people who are there. But yeah, in terms of standing out, I always find like if you already have the job, if you're at a place and you're at an entry level position and you want to grow and stand out, being inquisitive, um, being curious and asking a lot of questions of your bosses, um, and just showing it that you are genuinely interested in the field as a whole. You'll benefit from asking the questions. You'll learn a lot, but also it shows them that you want more than what this job is. The people who don't stand out and the people who don't stick around very long are typically the people who come in and put their headphones in and do the work and go home. And um, it's just hard to help somebody develop their career if you don't know what they're interested in. So, like John said, yeah, saying when you really want something, but also having the people around you help you find what you want by asking questions. Um, is usually huge. And then in terms of, yeah, just like applying for jobs, it can be just kind of crazy, but following up and saying thank you when you do get opportunities, making a point to do that and keep your name in front of them. Because even if you don't get that job, they'll probably remember that you did that. And if you apply for another job, you already have a leg up. Yep.
Yeah, I agree with both John and Brian. And you'll be probably unsurprised to find that in my particular line of work, the more things you do, the more you're going to stand out. Um, there is something to be said about being a master craftsman at something, but the jack of all trades is such a better position to, the more skills you've learned about different things, the more skills you have. So the less you're caught off guard. If someone asks you to do this thing, you've done something very similar, or you've used a program kind of like that. So I'm nowhere near a music producer, but I've edited enough things and been with enough people doing computerized editing and stuff that I can at least hum the tune. Uh, so so having that diverse skill set is probably most um, the best way of standing out in my field. And I think also, my field is a weird one, but in engineering in general, when you're talking about automotive, there's the car, but there's also all of the plastics in the body, and there's all the upholstery, and there's the robot that's running the thing, and there's the programming, and there's the tires, and all of this different metallurgy and design and physics, and it all goes into making a car. Or I talk about a fountain pen and how like someone probably spent 6 years of their lives making this pen, and like the spring inside of it and the ink and how it only comes out when I write on it, not dripping on my pants, and all those weird innovations. And now it's a $6 thing. $6. I'm apparently a new economy or something. But yeah, anyway, so standing out means doing more and getting out there, getting away from that comfort zone and always trying new things. That's the best advice I could give.
I would say that on the application and the resume side, we really appreciate or really look for people who can speak to our mission and values as an organization. So if you are applying for a job, really look at the especially in nonprofits or in government agencies, looking at what those nonprofits or agencies do, and speaking to how you contribute to that mission or how you have experience in providing a similar mission or similar or demonstrate values. And I would completely agree with when you are standing out as a entry level employee is asking questions, demonstrating that you're really interested in learning more about the organization, um, finding context for why things are the way that they are, and maybe providing some input that would be meaningful to change them and make them better, and for the library to adapt.
So just have one more question, or planned question, I should say, ahead of time, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So what advice would you give to students who are unsure about their specific career path, especially within this kind of industry of arts, media, and entertainment? If we could start with Kirk, and then we'll go to John.
I guess it would reflect back to something that Brian said a little earlier. You can't find Brian's job. They're not posting that on monster.com. And you couldn't find mine either. In fact, well, you could, but I actually talked to a Fab Lab in San Diego, and I was like, hey, I want to manage a Fab Lab before I open this one. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't pay enough. We only pay $80,000 a year. You wouldn't be interested. I'm like, no, I am. No, we couldn't hire you. You're way too qualified. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, really? So sometimes you do have to make your own opportunities, but but the biggest thing to remember is that every company and every industry needs you, whatever you're doing. So even if you are, I keep seeing Brian's thing, so I'm picking on music. I'm sorry so much, but like everyone needs musicians, no matter what company you're doing. Like there's a jingle, there's a ad department, there are so many opportunities for music. That's one of the things that sets humanity apart, is that we love to create music and we love to hear it and that kind of thing. So don't limit yourself to only record companies or only, for engineering, if you build bridges, don't limit yourself to only places that build bridges, because there's all sorts of other, studying an African rainforest and having that engineer who can say how the ants build those weird things in the treetops. Everyone needs your expertise, and nobody knows how to find it. So go off script and look for something that you will find interesting and fulfilling, and apply for that. Don't apply for your field unless it's something that you really like. Look for those corners that you can shine some light into.
Yeah, I think for me, well, one is the question is like, why would you be, what are you unsure of in your career path? Because that could lead to a change potentially. But if you want to be in this, I would hope it comes from a place of passion and desire, and so I'm really following, the idea of following your bliss. And if you do that, you will land in the right place. I really believe that. And if you're working towards that, I know that that's cliche and easy to say in retrospect, but I would kind of meditate on that idea of like, what are you unsure about? Because if you're really passionate about what you're doing, then like Kirk says, there's many routes to get there, and for a lot of us on this call, it sounds like they often are circuitous, and that's all right, as long as you keep focusing on what it is that's fulfilling you, what you want to put your time to. You have very limited on this. Using it for something that improves the lives of people around you, and really motivates you to get out of bed every morning.
Sorry, I've already forgotten who I said to go next, so I'll say Brian and then wrap up with Anne.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's kind of two different ways to think about it. So there's I know generally the end goal, but I don't know how to get there. And then there's I don't even know what the end goal is. I think if you are a really important thing, if you kind of know what the dream job is, or what the end of the road looks like, but you don't know how to get there, vocalizing to people what that is super helpful. And I wish I had learned that earlier, because now I feel like it's second nature to me. Where I told you we're building the songwriting festival, and I thought about it for a long time and I didn't know what to do. And finally, I just said it to some people I work with, and they're like, "Oh, well, let's do this, this, and this." And now it's like happening, right? So like people want to help you, but they can only help you if they know what you want. So even if it sounds silly, even if you're like, "Yeah, I want to be like the head of A&R at Warner Brothers Records someday," and then somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, well, my cousin does, this. I can introduce you to him." And it's not the same thing, but it kind of gets you down that path. If you have no idea what you want to do, then you just got to do everything. like figure it out. Finding out what you don't want to do is just as valuable as finding out what you want to do. And like John said, and like Kirk was saying, as long as if you're feeling passionate about something, it's probably worth pursuing, you know, and keep trying, keep telling people about it. It's really scary and vulnerable to tell people things that you want, but it goes a long way and becomes less scary the more you do.
Okay, so if you're thinking about public libraries or libraries in general, and you're unsure about it, I highly recommend trying it out. I think one of the things about libraries that's a little interesting is that people think it's about books, and it is. Books are a part of libraries, but they're not all of it, and sometimes it's not for everyone. So we have like very introverted people coming in who just want to read all day. That's not what a public library is going to offer you. So what's beneficial about thinking about going into libraries is there's libraries everywhere. And so there's a lot of volunteer opportunities. There's a lot of part-time jobs. There's a lot of libraries have foundations, and you can do some volunteer work through that and get a feeling of what a public library is like, or an academic library, or a special library, and figure out if that's the right thing for you. And if you have, we're always looking for people with customer service skills or public service skills. There's a lot of adjacent opportunities there. So if you work in retail, if you work in any way that you're being face to face with another person, that's highly valuable here at the public library.
Can I throw something in?
Please go for it.
So, and makes a really good point in looking at the panelists and knowing myself. All of us, I'm sure, are always looking for good volunteers, and that is a really great way of getting in on that thing. If you want to know how a public library works, you can work there. I mean, they're not going to pay you, but you can figure it out. Same with John, and same with Brian. I know the Englert is always looking for ushers and people to sell the merch and people who have some backstage experience, all sorts of things that you can do a little bit and get the feel for it and meet some of those people and dip your toe in. Volunteering is a great way of figuring out if you like that thing. Almost everywhere has some sort of volunteering opportunity, and it looks really good on a resume as well. So I highly recommend volunteering for something that you love, even if it's never going to be something that you get paid for.
Thank you for adding that, Kirk. I would definitely recommend. Same thing. Basically what you said of like, if you think you might be interested, go try it out. Maybe try to work there or volunteer or whatever the case may be that can give you some of that experience. So absolutely appreciate that. Well, thank you to our panelists. We have time for Q&A, but before we start, just want to say, John, Kirk, Brian, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your thoughts. This has been great. Really appreciate your feedback. Again, that is the official questions that we had. If anyone who is an audience member wants to ask a question of the panelists, feel free to. We'll give a few minutes here before wrap up if anyone wants to ask anything. And I'm okay with awkward silence too, so I can wait for a moment.
Abby, it looks like we have
I
a
was going to say we do have
question.
one in the chat. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Want to say thank you to all the panelists for partaking in this opportunity. So especially in more creative industries, how do you deal with and push through performance anxiety on the job and while searching for jobs, as well as appealing to popular masses? Good question. Anyone feel free to take a stab.
So yeah, I found that most of the anxiety, both that I feel and that I've seen people who work with me or for me feel, comes from just like not knowing what to do or not knowing if they're doing it right. And just ask. It's better than like just trying to fake it until you make it. I always kind of hated that phrase because if you don't know what you're doing, you're probably going to do it wrong, and then the anxiety starts building. So I think, like I said earlier, asking a lot of questions and just not, you don't want to be overly asking questions where everything you do, you're like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? But think about and like, think about it and internalize it, and then you'll see it's okay to make mistakes. But it's very good to ask questions if you're not sure how to do something. It helps me a lot with anxiety. And once you realize you don't really know anything, and you realize nobody really knows anything, everything's fine.
Yeah, we are definitely all pretending. That is true. The appealing to popular masses thing is something that I struggled with for a lot of years, and I finally found out that there isn't any popular mass. Everybody likes nerdery of some sort, and just nerd out. Like, find that thing you love, and you have a popular mass at that point. Star Trek conventions are a thing, and so are Star Wars conventions. And the people that you meet there who can speak fluent Klingon also are, librarians and doctors and part-time cashiers and whatever. And so, going back to what John said, doing things that you love, that you enjoy, finding out what those things are. There is no performance anxiety if you are enjoying the hell out of yourself. If you are having a good time and you are learning new things and you are loving it, you don't even realize you're asking the question. You're just asking those questions because you are interested. It's not to impress anybody. And that, ironically, is what always impresses me, is when I can see you loving to learn. And that's what I kind of look for.
Yeah, and I don't have any major insight into that question other than to say, if you are feeling that performance anxiety, then at some level that means you care about what you're doing and you want to get it right. And so I would trust it and know that everyone has felt that at some point in their life. And yeah.
And I agree with John, like also practice. You can kind of visualize how you want it to go and then practice your way into it so that it becomes kind of muscle memory.
Nikita, it looks like your hand's raised if you want to ask a question or put it in the chat.
Am I able to talk? Okay. I was just wondering, like, what do you guys like get out of working the careers that you work? Like, what you get out of it, like, on a personal level or even professionally, but mostly on a personal level is what I mean.
Yeah, I love that question. It's It's not money, for first of all, but I do tell people it's a really rich job. I get to do something mostly different every day and mostly work with artists who think the world differently every day, and so it's a really fulfilling and rich job in that way, and yes, I wish I made a little more money, and I wish I could, afford some things that I can't afford. But also, I don't think I would trade what I'm doing for that. It becomes a really hard equation. I have a lot of flexibility, a lot of creative input in my world, and just a lot of opportunities to meet a range of people with different perspectives. So. Um, Also, I think right now more than ever, it's really fulfilling to be in community with people and to be running a place where every day 20 to 40 people come through the door for different reasons that are all creative, is just really rewarding, and it feels like I'm where I am meant to be in that way. So it's fulfilling on that level.
I'll throw in. I was giving someone else a chance. Kind of same with John. I created this job. I was sitting on my couch and thinking, gosh, I wish I had more tools. And so I told MIT to build one of these places, and they told me if you want it, you got to build it. And so I quit my job and started something from scratch with no idea what I was doing, which apparently is a good career path, but I don't suggest you follow it. So uh, because I am doing exactly what I want to do, and I can kind of, um, I don't know, I always call it I weaponized my ADD. If I'm tired of 3D printing, then I go laser cut something, and if I'm tired of that, then I go make a stuffed animal, or you know, almost always I can find an excuse to not do the paperwork part, which I know is my least favorite part, and I totally created myself. So I have no one else to blame except myself. But I love what I do. I can wake up in the morning and do it, and as John said, there's a lot of freedom in being able um, to do what you want, within some structural boundaries, of course. So it's fulfilling because it's um, exactly what fulfills me. And it took a long time to figure that out. And every time it's not fulfilling me, I can figure out why and change things around. So it's nice to have that flexibility as well.
I have a long history, personal history with libraries. My mom used to take me to the library every Thursday for story time. My dad, who was an electrician, loved to go and look up historical research. So that's what I studied, history. And we would find our ancestors, or we'd find what was in one place in the town and what was replaced it. And if I had a question about something, we'd go to the library and we'd figure it out. It's my first job. What I get out of working at libraries now is I get to pay that forward, that personal love of whether it be reading or history or just stories. I love stories, and um, I get to build that for the next generation, and see who's coming into the library today that's going to take on the mantle of being a librarian in the future.
Yeah, that's all great. I think for me, like art does so many things and means so many different things to different people, whether it's super personal for you or it's a way to be in community with people or both, or it's a way to feel rage or a way to feel joy, to escape or to engage. It can do so many different things. And so I get to do a lot of different things at my job. I get to engage with the people who live in the town that I live in, um, and try to serve them what they need, what they want, on a daily basis. And that's super fulfilling. And the ways it materializes is, the moment the band like walks out on stage and everybody starts going nuts, or the moment they finish a song and it's dead quiet and everybody's just locked in. I think those community moments is what keeps me going. Those when you can see the effect that art has on your community, and also knowing that you provided a job for an artist and it probably sustains them to be able to at least go do it one more time, and that's a good thing. That's a You're part of a chain of connection and expression, and keeping that train moving is important.
For sake of time, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you for those additional questions from the audience. Really appreciate it. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, for our panelists, for your thoughts and insights, and for participating. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, thank you, everyone, for your time and for being here.